All right, we are recording and we are live on Facebook. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Those of you who don't know me, although most of you do by now, I am Coach Laura, admissions director, and I wear many hats around here at the Primal Health Coach Institute. But I know Jen. Jen and I met years ago when you first approached us about, hey, this is what I do. I work with Dr. William Davis. We've had you on some webinars. You've done some work for us, including help write a course for us. You helped coach my husband, because let's face it, I can't coach my own husband. I love him, but he just lets me do it all for him. We all know that's not coaching. I needed somebody else to coach him. So Jen has been my husband's coach. So I really trust her. And she's here to drill down much deeper on this sort of gut in the human intestinal microbiome and working through this kind of topic as a health coach with your clients. Jen's phenomenal at this. So I'm going to let her kind of give her own bio. And I'm really going to just hand over the reins to Jen. She's got a whole presentation for you guys. So that this will be really, really cool. We do have some pre-submitted questions that we will go through, but many of the pre-submitted questions are also already embedded in her presentation. So some of these will be answered already. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat. So just as stuff comes up, enter your question. I'm going to keep track of it. But if it ends up being answered already in the presentation, you can remove it. I'll be keeping an eye on both chat and the Q&A. All right. All right, Jen, take it away. Let everybody know who you are and why you're here.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And hello, everybody. Laura, should I go ahead and share my screen?
I think that's a great idea. I'm going to open up the chat to everyone because for whatever reason, there we go.
And give me a moment here. Let's do it. Why isn't it doing it? Oh, here we go.
You're in.
Okay.
I can see it.
Great. Okay. All right. So thanks, guys. Good evening. My name's Jennifer Baynes, and I am a certified nutrition health coach. And I'm a program coach for Dr. William Davis. And I work also as a nutrition coach with Dr. Kristen Reynolds here in Wisconsin, who is a functional and integrative physician. I began this journey years ago when I was a competitive athlete and I was just trying to up my game through nutrition. And I needed to learn a lot more because I was competing with women decades younger than me. And so my journey just brought me to this place where I wanted to help myself and then help others. I met Dr. Davis back then, and I was really excited by his book called Undoctored. And then later I began working with him as an undoctored nutrition coach. And it just evolved from there. You guys might know him as the author of Wheat Belly and the Wheat Belly cookbooks. And I just love how his work really aligns with the primal work that you guys do. And my interest in the microbiome has followed his incredible research in the field. And now it's an integral, essential part of my coaching. And I call it coaching for the microbiome. And we'll talk about that and why it's really important to know some of these main issues as a nutrition coach, because it goes hand in hand with many clients' goals. So we will discuss why coaches will want to learn about the inner world of the microbiome. So we know that the human body contains far more microbes than human cells. I was going to dazzle you with a big number, but turns out there's very little agreement on what that number is. It's anywhere from 39 trillion to over 100 trillion. I think the latest is that there are 100 trillion microbes just in the GI tract alone, which is still kind of impressive. Our microbiome refers not just to bacteria, but includes fungal species, viruses, archaea, and bacteriophages, which are the viruses of bacteria. Bacteria are the most numerous in our microbiome, and they play the largest role in human health. And fungi are the next most important players. So why should health coaches care? I think you might know where I'm going with this. It's because of this big number. So 80% of modern day chronic illnesses are within our control, meaning the factors that cause things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, and metabolic disease are preventable. And so what is the root of chronic illness? I had to use that picture twice. It's just so powerful. At the root of these chronic illnesses is dysbiosis of the microbiome, plus the factors that go into metabolic syndrome. And there's your 80% of just about everything that's wrong with us. So as coaches, we've got our work cut out for us. We all know that we can help our clients prevent and correct insulin resistance. And this on its own is a big task. And it might be the number one health goal of many of your clients, things like weight loss and body composition concerns. But it's important to understand that the microbiome is interrelated to our metabolic system. So having high blood sugar, such as in diabetes, pre-diabetes, and to a lesser degree, any amount of insulin resistance increases intestinal permeability, which is another way to say leaky gut. The insulin level of someone with pre-diabetes, of someone who is overweight, has a large waistline, has love handles, has high blood pressure. These processes that cause weight gain and drive all these damaging health conditions also alters bowel flora. And these bowel flora changes increase intestinal permeability, increases endotoxemia, which are microbial byproducts, that in turn worsens insulin resistance. It blocks weight loss, it causes weight gain, and it's just round and round in a vicious cycle. So having a deeper understanding of the microbiome is critical to helping those with metabolic syndrome. So what is a healthy microbiome? What I love, the course goes deep into this. What I love learning about this is that the work of anthropologists are the ones who know this. There are ongoing studies of modern day hunter-gatherers that give a lot of insights into the microbiome that reflect the time before we added man-made compounds, which have altered ours. Their lifestyles of hunting and gathering reflect how we survived over the course of time. And they are also unexposed to antibiotics and food additives and herbicides and pesticides and all the microbiome disrupting factors that we experience. So modern hunter-gatherer populations are entirely free of constipation, hemorrhoids, diverticular disease, colon cancer, coronary disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other conditions that we regard as common, conditions that the anthropologists call the diseases of modern civilization. It's also interesting to learn how some of these populations have had their microbiomes assessed via stool sampling. And so populations like the Yanomami in Brazil, the Matsis in Peru, the Maasai and the Hadza in Kenya and Tanzania, and many are listed in this chapter in the course. And these indigenous populations live on different continents, separated by oceans and thousands of miles, yet they harbor similar microbiomes despite never having been exposed to one another. And from this course, you'll be thinking about these bigger ideas about whether we would want to mimic the microbiomes of these hunter-gatherers, or would it make more sense to rebalance our own and become more resilient to our own unique environments? One thing we know for sure is that we should work to cultivate greater species diversity in our own GI microbiome. And in the course, we'll discuss strategies to do so, such as increasing the consumption of fermented foods, restoration of what are called keystone species, and a frequent intake of prebiotic fibers that nourish our microbes. So what is a keystone species? And we'll talk about metabolites too. So these are crazy names. You'll eventually, they'll roll off your tongue, or maybe they won't. Pardon me if I stumble on them still, but you might have heard of some of these. So Akkermansia municiphala. This is just a partial list, by the way, and to keep this presentation short, these are just some of the technical highlights. The course obviously goes into great depth about this. So in the course, we talk about metabolites, and they are the products that microbes produce that play a critical role in health. Metabolites are the compounds released by the microbes, such as short-chain fatty acids, serotonin, vitamins, methylalamines, and more. An example you've probably heard of is the metabolite called butyrate. This is a fatty acid produced by the bacteria called Faecalibacterium prausnitzii and Bifidobacterium infantis. A reduction of these two species allow for high blood pressure, high blood sugar, greater insulin resistance, and disrupted sleep. So these are good ones to know. And the failed production of metabolites because of dysbiosis can change your basic metabolic measures, such as blood sugar, insulin resistance, blood pressure, uric acid, oxalates, B vitamins, and poor sleep. This first one, Akkermansia, you might recognize it. It's become a big name out in the marketplace. So in the world of probiotics, as well as supplements in general, we all know that the pressures of marketing are pretty intense. One of the things I appreciate about this course is learning the ability to distinguish what is necessary given the evolving nature of the science around the microbiome versus what is pure speculation and hardcore marketing. And there are several examples throughout the course of this. So Akkermansia, I'll talk about that because it is a big player out there right now. It can increase intestinal mucus production. It can produce metabolic mediators such as butyrate, which we just said. It reduces blood sugar. It can reduce endotoxemia. These are the bacterial breakdown products that cause many problems. It can secrete antibacterial peptides, and it can help digest human milk oligosaccharides or HMOs. That's another product out there that people are taking, but it's usually in breastfeeding infants. So the course will explain the ways that Akkermansia is vitally beneficial, but also in the ways that it can be harmful if it's not in balance. One of my favorites to talk about is so it's Lactobacillus reuteri. They've renamed it. It's now Limosilactobacillus reuteri. We will say L. reuteri.
Oh boy.
Some of you might already be familiar with this one from Dr. Davis's book called Super Gut. It's a keystone species that we are born with. We should be born with it. It's vulnerable to antibiotics. We get our microbiome from our mothers at birth. And so when one is born via cesarean section, then we don't get these keystone species. L. reuteri is common to all mammals. And what I love about this is that it is via the vagus nerve, it sends signals to the brain to produce the hormone oxytocin. So you might know that is the hormone of love and empathy and connectedness. Oxytocin also has age reversing effects that have been well studied in mice, and it's shown to these studies hold up in humans as well. So some of the symptoms of aging in mice, like thinning hair, thinning skin, loss of muscle mass, lowered social engagement and libido, poor sleep, have been reversed when given L. reuteri. In humans who consume high counts of L. reuteri, which I can talk about how to do that, we notice these very same benefits: smoother skin, reduced wrinkle depth, thicker hair, an increase in lean muscle mass, accelerated wound healing, preservation of bone density, deeper and longer sleep, appetite suppression, reduced social anxiety, and on and on. It also, as if that's not enough, it colonizes in the upper GI, the small intestine, and it produces several bacteriocins, which are antibiotic to the fecal microbes of SIBO. So we'll talk about SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So consuming L. reuteri is one way to correct and prevent recurrent SIBO. As a keystone species, it supports the proliferation of other bacterial species, as well as suppressing the methane-producing archaea. And so, when it comes to keystone species, what that means is that they serve important functions to other microbes, as well as to the host, us. And the loss of keystone species have major implications to us. And so the idea here is microbe A exists to produce metabolites that might help microbe B to produce something else, which encourages microbe C to proliferate and prevent the overgrowth of pathogens. So they work in these communities, these called consortia. And in the course, we again go into great depth, and you'll learn how to restore these keystone species and then which foods allow them to grow and to flourish. All right, so leaky gut. I think we all know about leaky gut. And what causes it? What causes this situation that is due to an unbalanced microbiome? Well, among the many factors that have been shown in clinical studies to disrupt the human microbiome are antibiotics, other pharmaceutical drugs like NSAIDs, stomach blocking drugs, statins, antidepressants. Pretty much any pharmaceutical is going to contribute to dysbiosis. Emulsifying agents, polysorbate 80, thickeners in foods, salad dressings, ice creams. So things like xanthan gum and gellan gum and, all those thickening gums. Preservatives, potassium sorbate, sodium benzoate, synthetic sweeteners like sucralose, saccharin, aspartame, food dyes and colorings, heavy metals like cadmium and mercury, chlorinated drinking water, herbicides and pesticides in food, and glyphosates. So the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup is also an antibiotic. Even exposure to everyday problems like stress and sugar consumption influence microbial composition. So these things cause dysbiosis, which is at the root of leaky gut. And in the simplest terms, leaky gut, you guys probably already know this, it's when the single protective layer of the small intestine is compromised. And what should be a tight gateway for nutrients from food to enter the bloodstream becomes large openings that allow bigger particles in, and it allows the endotoxins to enter the bloodstream. From there, these toxins make their way to just about everywhere in the body, causing catastrophic conditions. And this is why GI issues are not just about gas and bloating and constipation and diarrhea, but can present as other things that seem unrelated, like restless leg syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, gallstones, and so on. And the worst, if left untreated, way downstream, is colon cancer.
So Jen, real quick, before you go on,
Yep.
everything you just said on that slide right there is why every health coach needs to understand this better, because it affects everyone. I don't know anyone that can truly avoid some sort of exposure to glyphosate. I have a issue with dairy, and for a long time I was using like nut pods, which I always thought was pretty clean, but that has those emulsifiers in it. So here I am thinking I'm making a healthier choice, which, whatever, I don't have these massive sinus symptoms anymore, but I could be compromising my gut. So everything that you just stated right there is the argument for why every health coach has to, in some way, improve their understanding of what's happening in the human intestinal microbiome, even if you're not an expert in it, even if you don't go to market as the gut health course expert, the gut health expert or what have you. If you deal with anyone that has a health issue, there's likely an issue here. And a stronger understanding of this is really, really important. So I just wanted to put a fine point on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, this is just chapter 5. So there's so much more here, but yeah, I agree. And so we talk about SIBO. This is not a course about SIBO, but in your clientele, it's going to be a major topic, because I think the estimate is over 50% of Americans have SIBO to some degree. And if you're not familiar with SIBO, it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. SIFO is small intestinal fungal overgrowth. They've renamed IMO. EMO is intestinal methanogenic overgrowth, or we say methane SIBO. And then there are other disease states as well. But in general, it's the microbes of the stool which have ascended from the colon. And we know the small intestine isn't meant to house fecal microbes. And the lining, again, of the small intestine is 1 cell thick. So it's really these kind of bad, and they're not bad guys. They are not bad bacteria. They are in the wrong place, causing harm. And then, so interestingly, sometimes people who have periodontal disease or gingivitis caused by pathogens in the mouth. So a newer conversation is about a microbe called Fusobacterium nucleatum, and you'll get to know that term too. It's a huge culprit of SIBO, and these guys make their way down from the mouth to the small intestine. One practitioner who's in this field, she's a dentist. Her name is Dr. Debbie Osment, and she explains it very elegantly. That this Fusobacterium gets into the bloodstream from the gums and then travels throughout the body, but it makes its way to the colon, not through the digestive tract, and is a cause of colon cancer. So when they look at a diseased colon, they find this microbe, and then they find it in other areas where the cancer has spread. So it can be in lung tissue. And so it's a nasty one. It shouldn't be in your mouth. And there are like good genetic tests where you can test what's in your mouth. But separate topic, and I don't think the course goes into that. But back to SIBO, there are other causes of SIBO too. And just because it's ubiquitous, again, it's just important to help your clients either to diagnose it themselves or rule it out. And the course does go into ways to do that. SIBO is the underlying cause of leaky gut, but additionally, it's correlated with these other conditions: obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, IBS, IBD, fatty liver, autoimmune diseases, skin rashes, Parkinson's. I mean, just, I could go on. You'll also learn about the specific microbes implicated in other diseases like hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, celiac disease, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune, neurodegenerative, all the ones I mentioned above, gastric bypass, and then back to that oral and dental diseases. But on a really positive note, you'll also learn which microbes should populate in the upper GI and produce beneficial compounds that ward off pathogens like the L. reuteri, like those keystone species. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's, here's what's happening to pretty much all of us. So next we're going to talk about MACs, microbiota accessible carbohydrates. This goes by a bunch of different names that you guys probably know: prebiotic fibers, resistant starch, indigestible fibers, and there are fibers of all kinds: soluble, insoluble, prebiotic, bran, inulin, galacto-oligosaccharides. These are all, they're called polymers of sugars. We don't think of fibers as sugars, but they are. And we have enzymes, salivary, gastric, and pancreatic, digestive enzymes that allow humans to digest the sugars and polysaccharides, but they don't break down the fibers. The fibers that escape digestion in the upper GI are what feeds our microbiome in our colon. So they make their way down to the distal ileum and to the colon, where the microbes then consume them for nutrition. So this is a really different idea than what we've been told, that we need to eat more fiber. Fiber, when you hear that, they're referring to cellulose fiber. That's a major constituent of wheat and grain products. But cellulose is not digestible by our microbial species. So it's just a source of bulk, and it's not what we're talking about, and it doesn't nourish our microbes. So MACs are, there are just a lot of foods and compounds encompassed by that. And, let me just give you a quick list. So galacto-oligosaccharides, or GOS, these are from black beans, white beans, kidney beans, legumes, chickpeas, hummus, root vegetables. So turnips, raw white potatoes, radishes, etc. Inulin comes from FOS, comes from chicory root, but it can also, FOS can be found in onions, garlic, shallots, dandelion greens, asparagus, Brussels sprouts. All these lists are wonderful, all these foods. And these fibers are labeled bifidogenic because they are the bifidobacteria species love them. Xylo-oligosaccharides come from dairy, vegetables, fruits, bamboo shoots. Arabinogalactans come from carrots, radishes, and other root vegetables. Glucomannan comes from shirataki noodles. Beta-glucans come from mushrooms. Lactulose, pectin. Pectin is found in apples, pears, and citrus peels. So just tons of foods. And there's evidence also to suggest that nuts are another source of MACs. And this includes almonds, pistachios, walnuts, pecans, and hazelnuts. So recently also polyphenols have been added to the list of MACs. Polyphenols are the micronutrients present in many plant foods like red peppers, grapes, strawberries, and include compounds like epigallocatechins from green tea. We have a green tea recipe that we like to talk about, resveratrol from grapes and red wine, and quercetin from red onions and tomatoes. So again, more than 90% of polyphenols are not digestible by human enzymes, and they make their way down to the colon intact. And these compounds are quite beneficial in spite of not being digestible.
Hey, Jen, a couple people are asking if they can get copies of your slides.
Oh yeah, of course.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, that question's been answered. Keep going. We'll get to the rest once we're done. We've got a bunch. We've got a bunch that were pre-submitted as well as stuff as I'm seeing. We will get to them, I promise.
Okay, and I'm just finishing up here, so I'll be quick. So methods of assessment. We go into detail in the course about this as well. There are a bunch of different types. Unfortunately, many of them are subject to some pretty hardcore marketing. But so when you get into the whole stool testing, we talk about the pros and cons of these methods, excuse me, and which, the necessity of them and why. There are also informal methods to use that your clients can do at home. So there's the prebiotic fiber test. There are consumer devices that actually measure the gases produced by the bacteria. One is called the air device. And so in the course, we talk about ways to incorporate and to interpret the tests. Microbiome management. And this is where it becomes really fun as a coach. In this module, we discuss all the ways to rebalance and to repopulate and improve the microbiome via foods and supplements. So we've got probiotics. We talk about their composition, the rationale, the benefits, and the effectiveness of them. The restoration of keystone species. This is huge. We've already covered that. Fermented foods, the effects of fermenting species such as Leuconosta and Pediococcus species, the MACs, which we just covered, and then the role of, and this is so interesting, kind of a new area of fecal transplantation, which is a newer and very effective treatment for C. diff.
Can you explain what C. diff is?
C. difficile is an antibiotic resistant infection, really common in hospitals, and not a lot works anymore. And so I think it's Dr. Sabine, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Hazen.
Oh yeah, I follow her on Twitter. Sabine,
yeah,
she's awesome.
Yeah, she's doing groundbreaking work with fecal transplant. And let's see. Okay, so fermentation. As someone who does coaching for the microbiome, this is my favorite thing, and I really structure my diet around this idea. I love making, eating, and teaching others how to make fermented foods. So there's some great books out there. Sandor Katz is one of the just grandfathers of fermentation. So any of his books are good. There's Fermenting for Dummies. I know a lot of people start with that because it's very, sauerkraut. It's just simple. And then if you want to dive into some research studies about fermented foods, I'm a big fan of the husband and wife microbiologist duo. Their names are Justin and Erica Sonnenberg, and their research facility is called the Sonnenberg Lab at Stanford, and they study the benefits of fermented foods. And this is just a great place to go, learn more for your clients.
I'm thrilled that there's a whole place set up for this kind of research, because I can't imagine that, it's not like they can patent this kind of stuff, but somebody cares enough, or someone's funding it somewhere that's producing this kind of, because this is what we need, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we need like some like double-blind, placebo-controlled, peer-reviewed study to prove that fermented foods work, but who's going to run that?
Yeah.
The whole thing is so ridiculous when we've got literally thousands and thousands and thousands of years of evidence, basically. Anyway, don't get me started.
Right. No, I know I'm right. And so many cultures around the world know this already. And, our great grandmothers knew all of this. And, we just need to get back to
That's
it.
right.
And so kimchi, I hope everyone knows about kimchi. It's one of my favorites, just fermented cabbage with peppers and spices. It's one of the most beneficial varieties of fermented vegetables. Again, if a healthy microbiome is hallmarked by having a great diversity of species, this can give that to you. It's suspected to account for the very low incidence of cardiovascular disease in Korea. It as with other fermented vegetables, the microbes that live on the surface of cabbage leaves serve as the starter. And then the species that are similar to those in sauerkraut, like Leuconostoc mesenteroides, become dominant over time, and they crowd out fungal species and even archaea. So there you have it. What does the future look like? There's just been an explosion of the science of the microbiome. The pace that has been generated is breathtaking, growing and giving new insights just about every week. There's still so much to discover, but I want you to know that health coaches can already apply the existing knowledge to achieve huge improvements in health. And because it is transforming the entire landscape of health and disease, you can see that even a few years ago, we didn't know things like depression. Depression can be generated by intestinal microbes and their byproducts. We didn't know that the brains of people with Alzheimer's dementia, when examined at autopsy, have been found to be filled with fungi. We didn't know that restoring one lost keystone species, L. reuteri, can provide effects that are as far-ranging as restoring a sense of empathy, compassion, restoring strength, increasing dermal collagen, fewer skin wrinkles, preservation of bone density, which is huge in postmenopausal women, if that's your demographic. It is mine. And with no side effects. And that's what also is a profound idea here. There are no side effects to giving, having your clients try something new, try some fermented foods. We're not, recommending drugs here. We're talking about, perhaps yogurt or sauerkraut.
This is something Dr. Davis has said on multiple webinars of ours too, in terms of just the upside versus downside, like the risk reward benefit on fermented foods it's just unbelievable, and why it's so safe and so right in the wheelhouse of a health coach compared to, I don't know, surgery or prescription drugs that have a laundry list of side effects that go with it.
Yeah,
even
and there's
some supplements, if you overdo it, it's some are completely fine and harmless if you overshoot the mark. Some aren't, and can throw other things out of balance if you're not careful. In fact, there was a question here about B12 I'll read in a minute, but anyway, thank you for making that point, because there's literally no downside risk here to and Jeff had commented like, this is all awesome, but like, how do I get my clients to start considering this kind of stuff when we're just trying to keep them out of the McDonald's drive-through? Something to that effect. But Jeff, this is where like the low-hanging fruit, you don't have to learn how to ferment carrots on your own kitchen counter. There are many truly fermented food. Kimchi's one. Like if you find kimchi in the grocery store, it's likely fermented. Not all sauerkraut is, and not all pickles are, but some are. And most main grocery store chains do. And it's one kind of piece of the low-hanging fruit that if you can get a client to start adding that in, again, it's just, is it going to solve their problems? Probably not, but you know what it is? It's a step in the right direction. It's learning a new behavior. It's building a new habit that they can build on from there.
Yeah. And that's just one of the beautiful things about this course too, is it it weaves in and out of, you zoom into the science and the specific microbes, and then you step back out and you see, oh, look how this relates to food. I think as health coaches, we're all like, we share this incredible love of good food, and there's just it's just so symbiotic, really. And then just to end this on a very positive note too, there's the work that's being done out there that right now is, there's one set of researchers with a company called the Bio Collective, and her products are under the company BiotiQuest. Her name is Martha Carlin. They have discovered microbes that metabolize glyphosates. So in some of their probiotic blends, you're actually breaking down glyphosates, which your body stores. But they're not only making effective probiotics for us, they're using specific microbes to clean up toxins in the soil. So they're working with farmers and landowners who were victims of the chemical spills last year. Maybe that was this. And just a lot of really positive things are happening in this world of microbiome. And down the road, there will, we can imagine all kinds of other things, microbes being prescribed for, burn victims, for post-operative wounds and injuries. So this is just a sample of some of the emerging technologies and how microbes are being put to work, even just now. So I want to thank you all for joining me and sitting through this. And now we can get into some Q&A. But I also want to make sure here you guys all have the link for the course. I can't say enough good about it. I think it'll give you the confidence to start, talking to your clients about their microbiome. And
if anybody that's here has taken it, you can pipe up. I'd love to hear what some of your aha moments were and what you loved about it. But we have oodles of questions here. Some have been posted here. Some are in what people wanted to know when they signed up. So Suzanne had posted in two places, so I'm going to read hers. That she's looking for a current SIBO treatment. I have high hydrogen gas over methane gas. Any feedback appreciated, as I know meds don't always work, or it returns and once it appears treated. This is something that we hear a lot, that people feel that they've resolved their SIBO and then it comes back, which I think is a great argument for just buying the air device. And neither Jen or I has any skin in this game, but you can pay whatever you're going to pay to get a breath test done with a practitioner. And then if it comes back, you got to go pay and get that test done again, versus you could just have it at home and test for it. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jen?
I love the air device. It can quantify what's going on and distinguish between methane and hydrogen SIBO. You can use herbal antimicrobials. SIBO is persistent. SIBO has a 50% recurrence rate. So a big part of SIBO management is not just, nipping it, but then the follow-up. You can't just do nothing, right? So as you can see, if you've killed off a bunch of microbes using a pharmaceutical antibiotic or the herbals, they're still antimicrobial. You've got to follow that. You've got to repopulate, and sometimes you have to do that in a very gentle and nuanced way if somebody has a pretty damaged GI tract. So that there are steps, and that follow up is critical, and that can be a cause of recurrent SIBO, is just not following up. That makes sense.
So Suzanne also commented, she has both SIBO and leaking gut, and she's a PHC. So, and I had commented back to her like, hey, you know what? A lot of us came to PHC because we likely had SIBO or the symptoms of it. We had our own health journey, and it's how we landed here. She's like, I don't eat any of these foods that tend to compromise her diet. She's super vigilant with her diet. She's trying, when you said you're trying a FODMAP diet, Suzanne, do you mean a low FODMAP diet? Do you mean incorporating FODMAPs? What do you mean there? And doing lots of gut supportive supplements. Maybe you can expand on that, and Jen can give you her 2 cents. But let us know if we've answered some of your questions here, and then I can mark it as done. Hold on, I see a new message. This might be her responding.
Yeah. So no FODMAP diet. There's no diet that can turn SIBO around. It's not diet unless we're calling the yogurt. So we have this funny thing that we do. We make yogurt. We ferment the L. reuteri bacteria in milk because lactobacilli, right? They love lactose. That's part of their name. They grow and flourish in milk. So we make yogurt from it. Then we end up with these incredibly high bacterial counts. And Dr. Davis has done the research on this. And we know that we get about 250 billion microbes, which is a big number.
Yeah.
Much bigger than you'll find in any probiotic capsule, right? And that when that populates in the small intestine, it creates those bacteriocins, remember? And now we have an internal natural antibiotic towards the microbes of SIBO. So in that case, that's a food that will nip SIBO. But the low FODMAP diet, now the AIR device is marketed as a low FODMAP tester. And I think she asked, where do you get it?
Where to get it. And it's spelled AIRE, right?
Yeah. And it's a company called Food Marble. So you go to foodmarble.com. I think they're in Ireland. And yeah, so let's see where.
Yeah, we got some other ones. Tanya is saying, can you comment on Dr. Davis's take on lectins? Many of the MAC foods mentioned contain lectins, which many practitioners recommend against.
Yeah, I don't like getting into these book wars, but he's pretty much debunked the author who took a pretty deep dive. I think he's a cardiologist too, into the whole lectin issue. Not something we talk about at all.
Yeah, so essentially Dr. Davis disagrees with the posture some other doctors have taken on lectins. And look, some people are, I would imagine, likely sensitive to them. Many lectins can actually be sort of neutralized if you just cook things. Fermentation, is something that can help reduce that as well, or cooking things. And so there's ways around that for sure.
Yeah, well, and if we're talking about, legumes and beans and things like that, it's actually the prebiotic fibers of those that this is a clue. This is how you can help your clients know if they have SIBO. If you can't tolerate prebiotic fibers. Yeah. So you get gassy or symptoms from hummus or, lentils. I think that's a big one.
Yep. If you just sort of ingest some inulin and then go back and test it with the AIR device, that's a big, or you just feel super bloated. Yeah. Doris is saying, I just read that B vitamins ferment in the gut and are taken up in the small intestine. Is that true?
It is true. Yes. So there are a lot of conversations about people with the MTHFR genetic variant and how they need to supplement with B vitamins. Dr. Davis does take a pretty deep dive into this issue, not in the course. This is outside of the course, but it's the same thing. It's this genetic variant that 30% of the population has. So it's not rare. It's a big group of people who probably have SIBO or are more prone to getting SIBO. And so if they might need to supplement B vitamins until they correct the dysbiosis. But as again, thinking ancestrally, how would 30% of the population make it this far needing to supplement with B vitamins? So things like that usually can be traced to a GI issue. And I think that's kind of the point, is viewing healthcare and health through this lens of microbiome really changes everything.
100%. Dr. Davis I just did an interview with him for a sort of virtual summit we're working on. Spoiler alert, guys, working on a virtual summit. And he just had a phenomenal comment that I use all the time now, which is, and he includes doctors in this, not just health coaches or other practitioners, that as a field, health and wellness healthcare, we need to stop thinking in terms of just treating illness all the time and start thinking from a mindset perspective is how do I restore health? How do I restore what's missing? Because that's the big driver of our illness, is that so much of what our body actually needs to thrive is missing in our current environment. So we are forced, we overeat, we consume things that get rid of these beneficial bacteria and allow other bacteria to proliferate. So if we start thinking in terms of restoring function and restoring wellness and replacing what we actually need so it can crowd out the stuff that's making us sick, it's just a different mindset switch. And it's 100% in the wheelhouse of a health coach. We're not treating anything, right? We're restoring. And I just absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So Ryan is asking if you wanted to ferment other probiotic strains outside of the course guide into a yogurt like L. plantarum, how do you determine what temp to ferment it at?
Yeah. You can dig into, and this takes some effort, but if you go into the research papers, I forget the search term you'd want, but you can get there. But in general, if you think about it, like L. reuteri and L. gasseri, these guys love body temperature. They ferment best at body temperature. So the ones that are going to be the most beneficial to us ferment at body temperature. So fermenting, yeah, about 100 degrees is a safe bet.
Yeah, this question came up in the pre-questions, and it may have come from you, Bert, but can high probiotic yogurt be made commercially? Will we ever see it on the market?
Can it? I can't imagine, knowing what I know about food production, a product that takes 36 to 48 hours to ferment doesn't really jive with mass food production.
Right.
So store-bought yogurts are typically fermented for about 4 hours. And just, the math of microbial doubling, and I think he talks about this in the course too. It takes even that last 8 hours of fermentation, these big numbers keep doubling, and that's how you get those high counts and those really noticeable effects.
Yeah, think about that, right? So if you cut things off at the 4-hour mark, all of those bigger numbers don't have the ability to multiply. That makes complete sense. But sorry, Bert, doesn't sound like that. We don't see that coming. And I don't know, maybe you can find maybe this is you, some really just ambitious person that does things in small batch. I don't know how you make good money doing it, but I could see it being a really cool like co-op opportunity, or just if you want to be known for something in your community. I don't know how that works locally in terms of food production or food service laws. I don't know. It seems like it would be a tough hill to climb, but maybe someone will figure it out. Tanya's asking, any comment on using Dr. Davis's Super SIBO yogurt long-term? Any downsides? Should you switch up your yogurt microbes, cycle them, all that?
Yeah. So I would say it depends on what you're doing. For my clients who are treating SIBO and they want to use the yogurts as their treatment, I encourage them to be very regimented and consistent, and taking, half cup twice a day for the duration of this treatment. Post SIBO, and Dr. Davis regrets calling it the SIBO yogurt, by the way, because this is really restoring these keystone species that most of us have lost. If you've ever taken antibiotics, drink chlorinated water, those lists, it's really eye-opening. We need these all the time. So yeah, cycling through the keystone species, whether it's yogurt or also fermented foods. I think fermented foods is the name of the game here. The keystone species L. reuteri lives in your body for roughly 2 weeks. So it's not like you have to have it every single day. But as important as getting the probiotics is feeding them too. So we want to pay attention to those MACs, these foods that feed our microbes.
Yeah. And Bert's saying he wants to do that. I'm doing it now, but small scale. Nice. Good for you. I think that's awesome, right? You build a name for yourself and you gain clients that way. I just think that's amazing. All right, let's get through some of these other comments, and then I'm going to take a look at this spreadsheet and make sure we got everything. Julia Walker, I'm going back to my skincare roots. As an esthetician, I'll be focusing on the gut skin axis. Ooh, very nice. I love that. So that's fantastic. Great information. A couple people here who have taken the course and that they find it amazing and super robust and super in-depth. So Jen helped write that. Thank you very much. Where can I get the ear device? We answered that. I've made the green tea for a client and she felt immediate relief from her gastric distress. She reported really great sleep that night. That's awesome.
Oh, wow.
I love that. Yeah. Annette, technically, I don't know what was wrong with my gut microbiome, but through education, I've learned I was definitely in dysbiosis. I keep my food simple, animal-based, and maybe sometimes fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, and sour cream. You're not the only one. I've heard a lot of people that really cleared things up with more of a carnivore approach, which was one of the questions, actually.
Oh, right.
Maybe that was something that came in kind of pre-submitted in terms of thoughts around a carnivore diet. So anyway, I have some, not thoughts, but observations. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people in those carnivore and keto camps have recognized that we still need some prebiotic fibers. And I do remember seeing this trend in the carnivore community of people consuming fruit. So it was like meat and fruit. It went from pure carnivore to some fruit. And I think that's why, you get some fibers. And the real problem is, what we know about Akkermansia, for instance. It has advantages, but when you deprive it of prebiotic fibers, it turns on you. So Akkermansia muciniphila means it's a mucus lover. That's the root of that word. And so when it over proliferates, and it's not, so it's out of balance, it starts to eat your own mucus lining. And so you want to feed it. And it, by the way, likes olive oil.
Interesting.
And so when you don't feed your microbes what they want, some of them turn and eat you, which is a horrifying idea. But then that's a contributor to leaky gut. It's eating your mucus lining, which is actually, it's just a one-celled idea in there.
Yeah. So Sarah Hotchkiss, Sarah, I just love you. She jumps on everything we do. And I know she's super busy and she's very successful. She actually runs a health coaching practice, like a brick and mortar. Like she sees people in an office. She's done our coaches corner. She's going to jump on this virtual summit for us. And she keeps piping in here. She uses the food marble with all her clients.
Oh, cool.
Which is just really fantastic. And that she actually found a local place that does this sort of small batch yogurt, but they can't sell it.
Yeah.
Right. But they could donate. I've seen people work around it there. Thanks for that tip, Sarah.
Wonderful.
So Suzanne, again, should we eat ferments and dairy yogurts? Should we eat ferments and dairy yogurts be consumed even if dairy intolerant and they both produce gas and bloating? Go slow and slow, ? I never know what to advise.
I know, right? Dairy is like the problem child in nutrition, isn't it? So, when you ferment milk for as long as we do, the bacteria are consuming the lactose. They convert it to lactic acid, which for any of you who consume these yogurts know that it's very, very tart. That's because of this conversion to lactic acid. So there's no lactose. So for anyone who's lactose intolerant, that's a non-issue. But then secondly, there are the proteins in dairy. So I don't know. I mean, we now see a lot of A2 protein here where I live, A2 milk, A2 cheeses from cow's milk. That's just the genetics of the cow. So I have clients who could never have regular A1 cow's milk, but can now consume A2. So like goat's milk is A2. A lot of people who don't do cow can do goat, but now we've got this A2 cow's milk too. I've had clients who said they haven't had dairy in 20 years, but they tasted my I give yogurt making demos and give samples and someone tasted it and she's like, wow, I felt so good that night.
Yeah. I love that. See, I keep trying A2, goat, and you know what I get is like, it's my sinus cavities up here. I get headaches. I get like this, the only way for me to describe it is like this heavy brain feeling. I think my sinuses are inflamed. So it's not lactose. It's definitely one of the proteins.
Yeah.
So I've tried to make it with coconut milk yogurt, and it just doesn't really sit up for me. So I kind of drink it as more of a kefir.
Yep. I was just going to say, we can cheat it and make it from coconut milk. It's a little bit harder to make it seem like yogurt, but having it be drinkable works. And actually, when Dr. Davis conducted those formal count studies, they found that the coconut milk came in slightly higher. So we're not losing bacteria from it. It's just, it's not quite the same product, but
I think you're right, Sarah. I think it's the casein. It's all sinuses. And I'm just like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Not worth it. So Peggy, so Leah is asking, what is the green tea? Is it fermented? So there's a recipe, right?
There's a recipe in the Super Gut book, and I think we put it in the resources in the course.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a combination of compounds that strengthen that mucus barrier. So it cross-links the proteins in the mucus. And so we want that. We want a strong mucus lining of our small intestine. And so it's the combination of the green tea, which has those epigallocatechins. And then we put in some FOS, which is a prebiotic fiber. And then we put in cloves. So just cloves, not clove oil. And that combination is a gut rebuilder. So in that post-SIBO, sort of follow-up, that's one of the strategies you can use to help a client rebuild.
I like it.
Yeah.
Peggy's asking, not sure if it's appropriate. I'm not sure either, but we'll see if Jen has an opinion. My 4-year-old grandson just had 6 juvenile polyps removed. What is a good resource to learn about this and help prepare questions for his follow-up appointment? I don't know. Is that in your wheelhouse?
It's not at all. And I'm sorry. Yeah, we get a lot of questions like that sometimes. And it's, I just like to emphasize that the things that Dr. Davis teaches us are how to kind of prevent these kinds of illnesses, how to lay the groundwork so that, we don't get them in the first place. I can write that down and get back to you. But we try to avoid the whole treatment of disease.
Yeah. Eric is asking again, if you can repeat the name of the Biotic Quest product that helps break down glyphosate.
Oh yeah. So the bacteria is a Lactobacillus plantarum, L. plantarum. And that is it's in several of their products. One is called Sugar Shift. The other one is Ideal Immunity. Sugar Shift, for those of you who work with people with insulin resistance or just high blood sugar, that is an immediate blood sugar lowering probiotic. It's really quite interesting. If you have clients who you do finger stick blood testing or CGM, you would see results pretty quickly.
I started my daughter on it. So my little 9-year-old has some issues with blood sugar regulation already. I'm already seeing signs of insulin resistance in her, and she lives in my house and we don't, but now that she's 9 and she's sent out into the world and she goes to birthday parties and things, she just does not respond well to any of that stuff. She's wearing a CGM right now. I managed to get her one and we're making changes, but I started her on that and it's helped, the Sugar Shift. I was able to just get it on Amazon, which is awesome. Okay, boy, let's see. Yeah, skin issues arise from you with dairies. Yeah, dairy's just tricky. Hannah, okay, is it worth drinking probiotic fermented sodas, even if not really knowing the microbe count? I drink GTs and Kavita.
Yeah, I can't comment on Kavita. I think they were bought by Pepsi or something like that. But GT, I have been assured that they oversee every step of the fermentation process, and that the owner of GT is spot on with fermentation. And you guys know that the labeling of kombuchas, they have to, they have to include the original amount of sugar. And so we don't know how much of the bacteria ferment all of it. But if you're unsure, you can just set it out on your countertop after you buy it. It doesn't have to go right into the fridge. So when it warms back up to room temp, the microbes will keep fermenting and reduce if you perceive that there's a sugar content, and you can taste it.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of GT. And that's probably the only one I would buy.
Yeah. Jitan, I recently was in the hospital due to throwing up the mucus from my stomach. Oh my gosh, terrible. So thank you so much for this great info. I've now signed up for the course. Yes, Jitan bought
Thank you.
All Access
Great.
Pass. She was finally like, just
Nice.
give me all of them. I'm just gonna like buy them all. Julia Walker, what are your thoughts on CBOs?
Can someone refresh my memory?
Yeah,
CB.
CBOs. Can you clarify that? CBO?
Oh, SBO. SIBO?
Oh, I'm sorry, SBO. I'm an idiot.
Are you
SBO,
talking about
SBO.
are you talking about soil-based organisms? So the
There you
spore
go.
forming.
Sorry, that was my bad. I totally screwed that up, Julia. Sorry.
That's right. Yeah, soil-based organisms. You know, we just finished interviewing at Dr. Davis Infinite Health. We had a big interview with one of the big names in that area, microbiome labs. And so we're going to talk more about that. But, you know, there's a claim out there that soil-based organisms don't survive stomach acid. And, you know, there are all these crazy things about double encapsulating probiotics so that it survives stomach acid. But we know that's not true, because we know that, you know, L. reuteri, for instance, populates in the small intestine. So it has to get through the stomach. A lot of these guys do get through the stomach. I don't think there's anything special about SBOs. I think in fact, we ferment one, it's a soil-based organism called Bacillus coagulans. And the studies of that one, Laura, I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's really impactful in a sports setting. It helps clear lactic acid. It helps with athletic recovery and muscle recovery. So that one's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a spore former. So
going through some of these other questions. So some of these I think we sort of already addressed. So someone's asking how to know what probiotics are effective. And here's the thing, when it's best to take them versus when someone should avoid taking them. You know, I know Dr. Davis has said things like they're not completely useless, but you know, they do some good. But so if you could maybe speak to the effectiveness of stuff that is bought like commercially, and when if there is a situation where someone should avoid taking them.
Yeah. And so as this science of these consortia comes out, so the communities of microbes, how they work together, I mean, this is probiotics, you know, 3.0, 2.0. That's where that's headed. So what we've seen up to now is probiotics version 1, which is a haphazard collection of microbes that, you know, they all sound good. We probably need them, but they might work against each other in collaboration. And in fact, Martha Carlin talks about this, where her scientists have found that, you know, no wonder a certain probiotic doesn't work, because it produces too much lactic acid for the person. So there are effects that we don't even know might be happening. And this is an emerging field, but I will say her probiotic blends are built around as a system. They are built to work together. And so a lot of thought and depth goes into that.
Here's another one too. So we already addressed artificial sweeteners. But what about sweeteners like erythritol and stevia, which are both technically natural, but they're not the same. One's a leaf, the other's a sugar alcohol. So they're different, and they're going to have a different impact on the gut. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. I didn't prepare any notes on this, but there is evidence that these are excellent for gut health. So I love sharing this with my clients too, because they're not just not bad, they're actually beneficial. So stevia, not everybody loves stevia, but there are healthy gut effects with stevia, with monk fruit, with allulose even.
Allulose.
So I would go for it.
Yeah. Here's another one that you and I talked about earlier that we were like, oh yeah, we should address that. Is SIBO really related to food, or could it be a mechanical issue related to an injury of the ileocecal valve or similar?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we can get into trouble as health coaches when we're helping our clients self-diagnose SIBO. And there are a lot of resources and ways to do that. Because, as you know, we can't say I think you have SIBO. You can say, Dr. Davis would say you have SIBO, or if you work for a doctor, you can do that. But then you need to start thinking about why do they have SIBO? And right, there can be structural issues, not just the foods or, years and years of wheat and grain consumption, of course. But then all the other factors that we talked about, all the toxins and antibiotics and stuff. But yeah, there can be the ileocecal valve. And I'm not a practitioner in this way, but my understanding is some people have a condition where it can be stuck open. And they can do some sort of visceral massage to get that back into normal function. And there are practitioners who do this. It's a specialty.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who have an extra turn in their colon. And so that's another structural issue. And that can slow things down and be a contributor to methane SIBO. I don't know how that's figured, probably colonoscopy or some sort of imaging to find that out. And then people who've had abdominal surgery, if there are adhesions or blockages, that can cause things that, it can cause SIBO and much worse things too. Yeah, so it's not all, but then like stress can cause SIBO. So it's really like this huge range of reasons, but there's a lot there to talk about with your clients to help figure it out.
Absolutely. Well, then we had another, what about the use of products like SEED, SEED or AG1? So are you referring to like those green powders that carry like a prebiotic and probiotic in them type thing, Mike? Is that what you're, yes, that's what he's referring to.
Okay. AG1, I don't know if they've changed it. Back when I took it, it was athletic greens and it was just a nice greens drink. I don't think it's necessary, but it tastes good. And I don't know if they've upped their probiotics in it or prebiotics, but what else? You mentioned seed probiotic, and that is one of the better ones. I think that's one of the ones though, where they double encapsulate.
Mm-hmm.
We want some of those microbes in your small intestine. We don't want it to stay encapsulated all the way to the colon. So it's a good idea to open up that outer capsule and
That's a good
then
tip.
take it.
Yeah.
You can also, and sorry, let me just say quick. Once you learn how to make yogurt, you can do this with all of your probiotics. You can, buy an expensive probiotic one time and then just take a capsule or two and make some yogurt from it. Then you can make yogurt from that on and on and on. So
I love it.
Yeah.
We have to close down soon, but a couple more. What are your thoughts on food sensitivity testing? Is it necessary to identify individual sensitivities for gut health? We talked about that.
Yeah, we talked about this and
not on here, but Jen and I separately. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, right. People have food intolerances. And as we were talking about, the food is not the culprit. It's the microbes. It's the terrain. So if you find that your clients have multiple food intolerances, that's actually a big red flag for SIBO. Getting tested can be important. It's not like, okay, we know you've got SIBO and it's okay to eat those foods. It's really not. And so you still want them to limit it, but they should know that that's temporary, because once they have this thriving, resilient microbiome, they ought to be able to eat just about everything. Maybe not dairy, but just about everything.
Yeah, I mean, there may be an argument for removing some foods that clearly cause a lot of symptoms while you're resolving the issue.
Yeah.
But the issue, and Dr. Davis feels this way, Dr. Ken Berry feels this way. There are more and more doctors that feel this way, that it's not the food that's the problem. Assuming, of course, it's a nutrient dense, fresh, whole food, ideally local, in season, or all of that, right? It doesn't have glyphosate all over it and all of that, but typically it's the gut that's the problem, that's causing all these sensitivities. When I take a look, I sent my little girls over to a friend's house for a play date, and the first question she asked is, does your girls have food sensitivities? So clearly this is proliferating. There's more and more kids that have them than ever before. That was never a thing when I was younger. But there are a lot of things that are in our environment now that weren't a problem when I was younger that are today. So thank you for
Yeah.
addressing that. And again, this
Yeah.
is where we get back into let's stop treating and start thinking about restoring what needs to be there. Oh, here's a question about candida overgrowth. What's the
Fungal
best
overgrowth.
way? Yeah.
Right. So then we get into CFO,
Mhm.
and right, that's a big deal. And it's tough. That's a tough one because it typically affects, has more of an emotional component. It's very much tied to that gut brain, there's, brain fog and skin conditions. That can be a really hard one for people.
Yeah.
Um,
So I was diagnosed with it several years ago from another functional medicine practitioner. I went on essentially a low candida diet in the very beginning. I was eating meat and veg. That's kind of it. And I really didn't even eat other fermented foods yet until my symptoms came down. And suddenly I seemed to feel better. And then I was able to bring things in. I definitely went on more of an elimination diet and then started to add things back in. And as my gut got healthier, I was
Yeah.
fine. But
yeah.
so I mean,
Yeah.
boy, brain fog. Holy cow, stress was a big
Fatigue.
driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's see. Anti-inflammatory foods. I have an individual seeking advice on how to control their flare-ups of Crohn's disease. So look, guys, a lot of these questions that are in here are best way to do this, fastest way to clear bloating, or fastest way to adjust constipation. Here's part of the problem. I don't know your opinion, Jen, but the fastest way to do everything is rarely the best.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah.
again, we're in this mode of treating things and trying to get rid of the symptom, which we know motivates clients. There's no getting around that. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the answer is going to be restoring what's missing.
Yeah.
And Jen did mention a couple of things like that. A sugar shift made a major difference in my daughter pretty quickly. These fermented foods, this green tea, a lot of this stuff that we've already mentioned really does help, but a lot of this stuff isn't instantaneous. And a lot of the medications people take for symptom relief are making the problem worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's where SIBO comes into play here. And that's why, the course, it goes into SIBO a bit, but really as coaches, I would encourage you to learn as much as you can about it. Because while correcting SIBO isn't going to be the cure for, ulcerative colitis, SIBO has to get nipped first for the rest to even begin healing. So,
100%.
and I recommend functional medical practitioners to my clients if they need that, but you can help them diagnose SIBO. Once they're sure they've got SIBO, you can guide them on a treatment for it. And again, there's that probiotic approach with the yogurts, and there's an antibiotic approach with herbal antimicrobials. And there are, 3 good ones we talk about in the book. Some people want that pharmaceutical. It works in about 50% of people. So there are answers to this.
There is. I'm scouring some of these other ones to here's one. Okay. And if there's something that's burning, go ahead and ask it real quick before I let Jen go. But this last one is kind of back to your roots, your running roots. What's a good pre-trail run, half and full marathon meal if you have a sensitive stomach? I don't know. I guess what's the root of your sensitive stomach would be a question that I ask myself. What do you mean by that? Because I've seen some folks too that have some issues. They don't want anything that's going to make them have to go to the bathroom while they're running. They don't like all this other stuff. I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how you used to fuel your runs.
Yeah. I'm not a runner. I was a cyclist, and I know this, there is something unique to runners that there are some GI things that happen when you're running. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. As a cyclist, though, I learned over time, I really did not need to have a lot of carbs. My events were under 2 hours, though. I think when you go beyond 2 hours, you need to start doing more of
So
that.
Suzanne's asking a quick question that we can probably wrap on. So she's got leaky gut, lots of food restrictions, isn't getting better. Does Dr. Davis do consults, thousands of dollars on gut and probiotic testing, taking lots of probiotics, Akkermansia too.
Yeah.
This is maybe a plug for his group, or what do you think?
Yeah. There are health coaches who can help you with this. He doesn't do consults. but
Jen does, though.
our coaches do. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Jen
we've
does.
got 2 coaches under his umbrella. Yeah, and any coach who's working with a functional medical practitioner as well would be able to help you. And
100%.
usually coaches cost less than the doctor.
100%. But he does have, what's it called? What's the name of this group?
It's Dr. Davis Infinite Health. So
That's
if you
it.
go to all one word, drdavisinfinitehealth.com, that'll get you there.
That'll get you there. Awesome. And so the course, for some people have already taken it, which is fantastic. Thank you.
Right.
I think we just have a couple days or 2 left that we have this opportunity to save some money on that. So hit me up if you haven't already enrolled in it. And then there's always the all access pass. But Jen, thank you so much. I'm just thrilled that you were on. Thank you for helping Dr. Davis with this course, because it's very easy for a course like that to get way in the weeds and way over your skis, where we have to kind of round that. But well, this is for health coaches. Let's make sure our coaches know what to do with this information. So Jen was the biggest driver of that in the course. And she offered to come on and do this webinar. We'd love to have you back, but it's been awesome.
Thank you guys. I love the work you're doing. And I think, your podcast is excellent. And I think you guys you're doing it right. Getting good coaches out there.
Likewise. Jen, where can people find you actually, before I let you go?
Yeah. A couple different places. I work for these 2 doctors, so it's amazing. I work for Dr. Davis, then I work for Dr. Kristen Reynolds at Golden Ray. So if you go to goldenray.com, it's Golden Ray, REY for Reynolds, goldenray.com. I'm there as a nutrition coach as well. And I can give Laura my email address if you'd like as well.
Yeah, we can post that in there. So that's fantastic. Thanks again. We had one more question about diverticulitis, but I don't know if that's, again, something that's in your wheelhouse or.
Well, I will say, I think one thing we know is at the root of it is methane SIBO. That's one condition that's correlated with methane SIBO. Usually people with diverticular disease have some degree of SIBO.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, I just think it's something that health coaches need to be aware of, at the very least, understanding what the common symptoms are. By the way, there's a bazillion of them. And there are so many contributing factors to this, that just knowing how to kind of rule it out is really helpful. I think, or at the very least, this sort of low hanging, there's really no downside.
Yeah.
It might be tough to get your clients to ferment their own yogurt, but there's lots within the course material that really does go into some pretty safe stuff that you can offer and that you can recommend. Yeah. All right. Okay. Now that I'm finally done, I'm going to let Jen go because I have another meeting, guys. I got to run. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions, email us. Jen just said that I can send you her email if you've got questions, and Jen will send me the slides, and then we'll send it out to everyone that was technically an attendant on this. So everyone will get it, whether you ask for it or not, because it's easier.
Yes.
All right. So thanks, guys. And thank you
guys.
Jen.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Thank you, Laura. You guys are great. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.